freedom of speech and expression has been widely regarded as one of the biggest pillars of any democratic society to exist. It helps individuals to articulate their ideas, to dissent from the prevailing norms in the society, and also sometimes to challenge the authority of the government and the people in power as well, and to question the people in power alongside. Yet, this freedom is not at all absolute. It is always with a reasonable set of restrictions. And societies have long wrestled with this idea that whether and to what extent certain forms of speech should be curtailed when they cross into the realm of obscenity. And yes, we are talking about the recent issue which has become a national issue now.
YouTuber Ranveer Allahabadia और समय रहना
YouTuber Ranveer Allahabadia समय रहना
where several social media influencers are a part of the ongoing police investigation where FIR has been launched against them, and Assam police and Maharashtra police are investigating the crimes related to obscenity. And all these social influencers were part of a comedy show. Now here the question which we have to address is that what are the reasonable restrictions to freedom of speech in our country? And is the freedom of speech right in our country absolute or not? So you take example of two greatest democracies in the world, USA and India. Now USA, there is First Amendment which ensures freedom of speech and expression to its public, and it's a very widely known amendment in the entire US, in the entire world as well. Now if you see the case of India, Part 3 of our Indian Constitution talks about the fundamental rights to its citizens. And out of those fundamental rights, one fundamental right is under Article 19, Section 1, which deals with the freedom of speech and expression in our country. However, the very next section, that is Article 19, Section 2, states the reasonable restrictions to these rights. So are fundamental rights in India absolute? The answer is no. Fundamental rights always come with a reasonable set of restrictions. In order to ensure public sanctity, in order to ensure order, in order to ensure morality, these rights cannot be given absolutely to the citizens. There needs to be certain level of restriction on these rights in order to ensure a civil society. Which is why the right to freedom of speech and expression comes up with reasonable restrictions in the interests of sovereignty and integrity of India, also ensuring public order, decency, morality, and other considerations as well. And here, the term decency and morality are of importance for now. And these constitutional provisions set the stage for regulating content that might be considered obscene and which are contradictory to maintaining public order and which are contradictory to the decency and morality which Article 19, Section 2 talks about. So in today's session, we'll talk about freedom of speech and expression versus obscenity. Which is more important? What has been the different case laws in our country in relation to this obscenity, and what are the reasonable restrictions to freedom of speech and expression, and how do you measure a particular content to be obscene or to be rightful for the consumption of the public? All these questions we'll be trying to address in today's session. Hello, my name is Preetpal Singh and you're watching Perspective. Now let's talk about the issue first. Recently, a YouTube video was surfaced and several Instagram reels surfaced where a social media influencer talked about and gave allegedly obscene remarks on parental institution of our country.
Would you join in once and stop it forever?
And several other remarks were also given in the whole show. Now what stood out was that these remarks went viral on internet, and after that cases, FIRs were registered against the influencers involved in that comedy show in police stations of Maharashtra and that of Assam. And one thing to note here is that Indian judiciary is no stranger to hearing cases about works or actions of public figures being labelled as obscene. Such cases in our country are integral to understand that how laws around obscenity in our country have evolved, especially when the digital spaces are interwoven with those laws. In the past in our country, several Bollywood actors, several Hollywood actors, several comedians and TV stars have also had to face such controversies where their comments or their actions or their works were criticized as obscene. And as you know, that there are new codes working in our country, one such as Bharatiya Nyaya Sanhita. Now, Section 294 of Bharatiya Nyaya Sanhita punishes those who sell, who import, who export, advertise or profit from obscene materials such as books, paintings and figures. It also includes any display of content in electronic form. So this is under section 294 of Bharatiya Nyaya Sanhita of our country. But the real question is, it describes all such materials as that which is lascivious or appeals to the prurient interests of the society. That is the material which is overtly and expressively sexual, or which would tend to deprave or corrupt the people who are likely to read, see, or hear the matter contained or embodied on it. That is the content. Now, lascivious, the term lascivious here means that anything which is driven by lust or showing overt sexual desires. And this is considered obscene under the law. And prurient interest refers to the excessive or morbid sexual interest or sexual thoughts or practices. Basically, prurient means the term which is marked by arousing an immediate, an immoderate or unwholesome interest or a desire on sexual activities. So if any content, according to Bharatiya Nyaya Sanhita, any content leads to these things, that is lascivious or is appealing to people's prurient interests, that would be considered obscene, which the people who consume might tend to deprave or corrupt them in terms of morality or in terms of any other kind of content is considered to be obscene under Bharatiya Nyaya Sanhita. And in that case, there can be punishment of up to 2 years of imprisonment or a fine of 5,000 rupees for the first time offenders. Now, this is one law regarding obscenity in our country. There is one more law, that is Information Technology Act of 2000. So there is section 67 of IT Act of 2000, which also deals with publishing or transmitting obscene materials online. Now, the definition of obscenity or obscene material is same as compared to the BNS, that is Bharatiya Nyaya Sanhita section 294. So the definitions of obscene material and obscenity is same. However, the IT Act of 2000, it provides for a more rigorous imprisonment. There can be imprisonment of up to 3 years and a fine up to 5 lakh rupees for the first time offenders in this IT Act of 2000. But till now, we have just talked about the laws. We also have to take into consideration the opinion of the courts and the judiciary in this matter. And the opinion of judiciary over the last many decades and centuries have evolved on this. And the most important landmark early ruling on this obscenity law in the world can be seen during the book of Lady Chatterley's Lover, which was written by an English author, D.H. Lawrence. Now, the book was considered scandalous and overtly sexual at that point of time when it was published in multiple locations like India, United Kingdom, and different other places as well. Now, this book was published in 1928 in Italy, 1929 in France. However, in England, the book was unavailable until the year 1960. And in 1964, the Honorable Supreme Court of India held that this particular book was obscene under the section 292 of the Indian Penal Code, which existed then. Currently, the section is 294 of Bharatiya Nyaya Sanhita. Before that, it was section 292 of the Indian Penal Code. And the Honorable Supreme Court of India suggested and said that this book is obscene under section 292. And this was under Ranjit D. Udeshi versus State of Maharashtra 1964 judgment of Supreme Court of India. And this judgment was given by the Supreme Court by borrowing from the British case called Queen versus Hicklin 1868 case, which laid down one very prominent test which will be there for obscenity. We call it as Hicklin Test. And this test works in determining that whether a particular piece of work or an art or anything can be considered obscene or not. And in Queen versus Hicklin case of 1868, Justice Cockburn stated that the Hicklin test of obscenity is that whether the tendency of the matter charged as obscenity is the tendency to deprave or corrupt those whose minds are open to such influences or not, and into whose hands a publication of this sort may fall. In simple words, we can say that a work can be considered obscene if a part of it is proven to degrade individuals whose brains are open to such bad influences. That is what was Hicklin Test all about. And Ranjit D. Udeshi versus State of Maharashtra case, it followed this Hicklin Test. And they labelled that book, Lady Chatterley's Lover, as obscene under the section 292 of Indian Penal Code. However, one very interesting thing to note here is that Honorable Supreme Court of India took the help of United Kingdom's judgment of 1868. Few years back, United Kingdom had changed its own perception only, and the standard of obscenity of UK had already been changed. The Obscene Publications Act in UK of 1959 stated that the work must be considered as a whole before considering its effect on the likely audiences. So UK started taking a more liberal view on obscenity. But the judgment given by Honorable Supreme Court of India, it went on to 1868 judgment of UK court, which is again a very ironical fact. And there was one more test which was evolved in United States of America. We call that test as Miller test. Now one is Hicklin Test, which is there in UK, and one is Miller test, which was formulated by US. So US in 1973, in a very prominent landmark judgment of a Miller versus California, gave this test in the US to describe which material can be considered as obscene. And the court said that the material would be considered obscene if it satisfied the following conditions. The first is that the average person applying contemporary community standards, this word is very important, contemporary community standards. So an average person applying contemporary community standards would find that work taken as a whole appeals to the prurient interest or not. So work needs to be taken as a whole and community standard needs to apply to ensure and to satisfy that is it appealing to the prurient interest of the people or not. That is first one. The second is that the work depicts in a patently offensive way sexual conduct specifically defined by the applicable state law. That is second. And the third is the work taken as a whole lacks a serious literary, artistic, political or scientific value. If all these three conditions are satisfied, a material, a work would be considered as obscene. So again, a very holistic, a very liberal view given by US Court, US Honorable Supreme Court of US in 1973 under Miller case. Now both these tests, that is Hicklin Test and Miller Test, are there in the world right now to test obscenity of a particular material. Now let's come to India. Now in 2024, that is last year itself, Honorable Supreme Court of India has quashed the proceedings against the creators of a series known as College Romance under the Section 292 of the Indian Penal Code and Section 67 of IT Act of 2000. The prosecution argued that the characters which are on the show, they used vulgar language and also the plot revolved around the college students offensively discussing and indulging in sexual activities. But in this case, Honorable Supreme Court of India again took a wider view of what obscenity actually means. The court, however, held that there is a fine line between what can be considered as obscene and the language which can be considered as profane, foul, or indecent. So the justices present in the Honorable Supreme Court of India said that obscenity relates to the material which is arousing sexual misconduct or which arouses sexual and lustful thoughts. And it is not actually in the case of abusive languages, which is why it will not be considered obscene. Also, the court highlighted in the community standards test that while the literal meaning of the terms is sexual in nature and they may refer to sexual practices, but they are not necessarily arousing sexual feelings or lust in view of ordinary prudence or ordinary wisdom and common sense as well. Rather, the common usage of these words is to highlight some other emotions and feelings of an individual. So in this case as well, the Honorable Supreme Court of India highlighted that this particular series is not obscene. So again, a wider and a liberal, expansive view in relation to obscenity in our country has been taken recently last year by the Honorable Supreme Court of India. Now in this whole debate, where freedom of speech and expression is on one side and obscenity is on other, what is of critical importance for us to understand is that is any such thing or any such activity destroying the moral fabric and the morality of the society or not. See, because ideally we see the liquor shops, liquor stores, and different other materials being circulated in the whole country without any restrictions. Now, is it curtailing the moral decency? Is it curtailing or is it reducing the moral compass of the society? This is the question which we need to ask ourselves. And the community standards of US, UK, and India, definitely they are not comparable because the evolution of the societies of these three countries have been different. The society standards are different, the public norms are different, the moralities are different, which is why we need to have an indigenous method to understand what is a community standard and is anything against those community standards or not. And one very important fact over here is that if any law over obscenity, is it applied or if it is applied in India, it should be applied universally. So the first question is, should any such law exist in our country? The answer is definitely yes. But its implementation should not be selective. Its targeting should not be specific. Rather, its implementation should be universal. It should not be targeted to only certain sections or only to certain individuals, and as and when the time deems fit. It should be then implemented universally, and any such activity which is against those norms, either on Instagram, either on YouTube, either on Twitter, or either on any other social media platform or other media platforms as well, like newspaper, televisions, these activities should be dealt in a singular way, and a single simple law should be there to ensure public decency and morality. Targeted intervention and specific implementation of such laws raises some very specific questions, which is again questioning the authority of those in power. Now, as this debate on freedom of speech and expression versus obscenity, it's ongoing, we need to understand that it is a nuanced and an evolving debate. And in India, which is a very vibrant democracy, tradition plays a very important role. The deep-rooted societal values of India, they play a very critical role in enshrining and ensuring the moral fabric of the country. But as the technology is transforming and as the information is disseminated and consumed in a very dispersed way, as the information in our country has decentralized, where anyone sitting in any room and any corner of the country can become a social media influencer with just a mobile phone and an internet connection, if such decentralization is there, it becomes the duty of the public and the population as well to ensure self-policing and to ensure self-curtailment of certain things which might incite some bad feelings in the society and might challenge the moral compass of the society. So self-censorship alongside stricter implementation of laws universally should be there in order to ensure better outcome for the society, for the nation as well. Now, what are your views surrounding this issue and the action being taken by the police and the governments for these social media influencers? Do let me know in the comment section. We over here, we are not taking any sides that who is wrong or who is right. We have just presented the facts in as clear and as transparent way as possible. Now, it is based on your wisdom, your judgment, and your maturity that what do you think is the right step in future and what should be done in future. I hope you gained a new perspective from this session. All the very best and have a very beautiful day. Thank you.